year 1470. Amid the snow-covered mountains of Thessaly, a single bell rang out for the last time across a valley that would never hear its echo again. Inside the stone halls of St. Catherine's Convent, 23 women knelt in prayer. The words of devotion slipped from their lips into the stillness, the same words, the same morning ritual repeated for years. But today, the words tasted different, like ash, like farewell, like the last breath of faith. Outside, the horizon burned red, not with sunrise, not with the colors of dawn, but with the banners of the Ottoman Empire, an empire that had already devoured half the known world. The Ottoman army did not march, it flowed like a river of steel and fire. Where it passed, life vanished. Trees burned, churches fell silent, and another line was written in history. This land now belongs to the empire. Inside the convent, Sister Alani, the elder abbess who had guided her sisters for 12 long years, clutched a silver crucifix, passed down through generations. Her hands trembled not from fear but from certainty. She knew this prayer would be her last. Around her, the faces of the sisters were veiled in silence. Some eyes shimmered with tears, some lips carried a faint, wounded smile. Each of them knew that a storm waited beyond the doors. What they didn't know, what no one could have imagined, was that death would have been mercy. Because what was about to happen was not war, not slaughter, it was erasure, a deliberate, calculated extinction buried by time, hidden beneath centuries of silence. To the Ottoman Empire, this convent was not just a house of prayer, it was a symbol of resistance. Every bell that still rang, every prayer whispered in Latin, was a challenge echoing through the empire's veins. Faith is older than your sword. Sultan Mehmed II understood something most conquerors never did, that conquering land was simple, but conquering memory was the true victory. When Constantinople fell in 1453, and the first call to prayer rose from the domes of Hagia Sophia, the world lost a city, but Christianity lost its heart. The city's soul was stripped away. Mosaics were buried under plaster, bells melted into silence, and the church that had sung for 9 centuries was turned into an echo of conquest. On that day, Mehmed wrote an unspoken law. Loyalty cannot be killed, but if you erase the memory, erase the story, a nation dies on its own. And that law was now coming for St. Catherine's Convent. There would be no fire, no blood, only silence. First would come the promise, then the disappearance. First they would say, "Convert and live." Then, when the prayers stopped, they would make sure you never prayed again. Across the empire, Greek monasteries, Serbian convents, Armenian churches, the pattern was always the same. And now, it was Thessaly's turn, a quiet convent nestled in the mountains, where faith still believed itself safe. But these women who knew nothing of politics, whose tongues only knew prayer, whose hands held only rosaries, were about to become the empire's next experiment. They had no swords, no soldiers, no allies, only faith. And when faith stands alone before tyranny, it sometimes becomes its own punishment. Sister Alani's face seemed caught between light and fear, a trembling mirror of faith and fate. For 12 years, she had been the soul of that convent, a place whose walls carried the stains of time like layers of old prayers. Before that, she had tended the sick in a village that the plague of 1448 had wiped from the earth. Now, she sat in stillness, calm as those who make peace with death before it arrives. This moment, this bell, this silence might never have been remembered, had someone not defied history's will to forget. In the name of the cross, when the world changes, it is the silent places that scream first. It was the morning of 1470. Descending over the mountains of Thessaly in Greece, cold wind moved through snow-covered valleys as if nature itself were warning of a coming catastrophe. The bell tried to ring one last time. Its voice quivered through the air, then broke. It felt as though the line between a prayer and a scream had snapped. And with that, the story of the convent of St. Catherine was written onto a new page of torment. Inside those stone walls, 23 women knelt. Every breath was a prayer, every word on their lips a plea. It was the same morning they had greeted for years, but today a weight lay upon their hearts, a burden that could not be spoken, only understood by silence. Sister Magdalena, only 19. She had taken her vows just 2 years earlier. The marks of fieldwork still scarred her hands, wounds that looked less like labor and more like the signatures of fate. She had not come to the convent to hide, but to understand a world that had swallowed her entire family in a raid. Now this convent was her only home, her only peace, her only certainty. Across from her sat Sister Theodoris, 70 years old, yet with a light in her eyes time could not extinguish. She had outlived 2 abbesses, a king, and more wars than she could count. She had buried her fear of death decades ago, but what stood beyond the door today, no one had ever faced. If this moment in history does not strike you dumb, perhaps you have forgotten the price of the sacrifices by which this world was given to us. The greatest crime in the face of power is to keep your memory alive. Now, watch what happens when faith collides with an empire. Just before dawn, the first cannonball tore through the sky. It did not strike the church dome, it slammed straight into the bell tower. The sound was as if the heavens split open. Stone burst into the air, iron shattered into fragments. The bell that had rung every morning for 140 years exploded mid-swing, and its pieces fell into the very courtyard, where the nuns grew herbs and prayed for wounds to heal. The same hands that rose to heal now covered their ears. Trembling, Sister Eleni, the elder leader of the convent, rose in silence. There was no fear on her face, no cry, only the dignity of faith. She lifted the cross and began to sing, "Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy." One by one, voices joined. 23 voices, one hymn, one plea drowned by the noise of an empire. But history knows empires do not listen to songs. By noon, the doors were broken. Soldiers encircled the convent, but in their hands were no swords, only ledgers, pens, and inkpots. They looked less like killers than accountants counting faces, recording, listing. With them stood a Greek translator, a man from these very hills, perhaps once a neighbor to these women. His voice shook, as if every word were cutting his own soul. He read out an edict. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all conquered territories are subject to the Sublime State. Those who accept Islam shall receive protection. Those who refuse shall be deemed rebels. Sister Eleni stepped forward, serene face, clear voice. She looked straight into the translator's eyes. "Tell your Sultan we have already given our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender." The words turned to stone, even the wind did. Not try to stop them. The officer, Hassan Pasha, whose name still appears in military records of the 1470 Thessaly campaign, did not grow angry. He simply smiled the smile a hunter wears when sure the quarry will walk into the trap. He knew the Ottomans had mastered a way of breaking the soul without breaking the body. That night, all the women were locked inside their own chapel. No light, no food, no water. Only the cold scent of stone, and outside, the laughter of soldiers mocking their fasting and hunger. In a corner, 2 young nuns, sisters from Corinth, began to sob. Sister Magdalena lifted her head, dry lips, faint voice, but a living faith. Softly, she began to recite the Psalms. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Then another, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Little by little, the sobbing ceased. Only the sound of breathing and the echo of prayer remained. This was the moment when the Ottomans misjudged them. They thought these women were weak, not knowing that these women knew how to worship through pain. Fasts, cold night vigils, silence, sacrifice, restraint. This was their daily bread. What the soldiers called torment, the women called service to faith. But Hassan Pasha was not impatient. He had seen this before in the churches of Moria, Wallachia, and Serbia, where monks believed faith alone would save them. In the Topkapi archives there remains a letter Hassan Pasha wrote to the Sultan. "Faith is like a candle, it burns brightest just before it dies." He was about to test that flame. The next day the doors opened. A servant entered, set down bread and water, spoke to no one, looked at no one, and left. The nuns stared at it. Not hunger in their eyes, but the fire of trial. Old Sister Theodoris said, "They want us to eat, to give thanks, and to soften." Eleni bowed her head. "Then we will fast." The food was not touched. By the 3rd day, their lips bled. Their voices grew heavy, and the youngest could barely stand, but they did not bend. Hassan Pasha watched from the courtyard, astonishment on his face, irritation in his heart, and perhaps, for a single moment, respect. But for empires, respect is a passing feeling, not a strategy. At sundown on the third day, the doors opened again. No servant this time, no food. Hasan Pasha himself. He spoke in Turkish, the translator a shadow at his back. You are not criminals. You are not enemies. You are merely mistaken. The Sultan is merciful. He offers you new names, new lives, and protection. Speak a single sentence and you are free. Silence, or come with us to Constantinople. The Sultan himself will hear your case. Perhaps he will be moved by your devotion. He paused, smiled. But the road is long, and the weak do not reach the end. It was not a threat, it was a certainty. Sister Eleni looked around, some half dead, some absorbed in prayer, some clinging to breath. She met Hasan's eyes and said, "We will go." That same cold smile returned to his lips. Very well. We depart at dawn. This moment was never written on history's page, it was felt. What these women's faith said was lost in the noise of time, but silence kept it safe. That night felt as if time itself was weeping. The air in the corridors stood still. Shadows deepened on the stone walls, and inside the convent, the women drew warmth from one another's trembling bodies. No words were spoken, until Sister Magdalena, in a breath-like whisper, began an old hymn, the same one they had sung for years during Vespers. Gradually, every voice joined in, a single heartbeat of harmony rising in the darkness, silent yet unbreakable. Outside, the guards heard it. Some froze. Some turned away. One of them, years later, would tell his grandson how a group of women sang themselves past death, but that story too would be swallowed by history. For now, the hymn seeped through the cracks of the convent walls, drifting into the night sky, a prayer, a protest, a declaration. We are still alive. On the morning of the fourth day, the procession began. 23 women, wrists bound with ropes, walked south toward the coast. No carriages, no horses, only blistered feet, scorched dust, and a merciless sun. The soldiers did not hurry them. They didn't need to. The road itself was punishment, long, dry, and cruel. On the second day, Sister Irene fell. At 62, her knees could bear no more. She tried to stand, but her legs betrayed her. The soldiers marched on. Magdalena and Anna lifted her between them, dragging her for 3 miles. When night came, Irene was unconscious. By morning, she was gone. They buried her beside the road, no spade, no ritual, just bare hands and whispered prayers. The soldiers watched in silence. Hasan Pasha wrote in his ledger, remaining 22, by the fourth day it happened again. Sister Callista, mute since the siege, simply sat down in the middle of the road, closed her eyes and refused to rise. They left her there. When they reached the port of Volos 7 days later, only 18 remained. But something had changed along that road, something the Sultan's scribes hadn't foreseen. The women no longer wept, no longer begged. They walked in silence, not the silence of defeat, but of chosen endurance, a vow made beyond fear. Sister Eleni still led the line, hands bound, spirit unbroken. On the 7th morning, Hasan Pasha summoned her alone. What happened next does not appear in Ottoman archives, but it survives in a Venetian merchant's letter, discovered in 2003 in the Dubrovnik archives. I saw her brought back at dawn. She could not walk. Her eyes were open, God forgive me, but no one was inside them. They dressed her in silk and paraded her through the camp as a convert. Yet when I passed close, I saw her lips move. She was praying in Latin, softly, continuously. She had not broken. They had taken her body, but her soul was free. This was the strategy of subjugation the chronicles rarely explain. They did not want martyrs. Martyrs inspire rebellion. They wanted living shadows, bodies that breathe but carry silence inside. Proof that faith cannot outlast empire. Eleni rejoined the procession silent, stone-like, sky-eyed. The young wept, the old simply prayed longer. She was there and yet absent. At Volos, a great galley awaited wooden benches, iron shackles, rings of restraint. This was not a ship of passage. It was a machine of control for slaves, prisoners, and now these women. Their wrists were locked in steel. An inventory found in Topkapi Palace Museum, 1987, listed not names, only numbers, religious captives, female. 18. Destination, imperial household. Purpose, domestic service and conversion. That word service carried the heaviest burden of all. The voyage lasted 12 days. The sea roared, storms lashed the deck, salt burned their lips. Women who had only known wells and rivers vomited until nothing remained. At night, Magdalena whispered psalms through trembling breath. Greek, Serb, and Italian prisoners turned their heads to listen for a moment. Even the waves seemed still. When the galley entered the Bosphorus, the skyline of Constantinople rose domes, minarets, endless walls, the city glimmering like a blade in dawnlight. For centuries, it had been called the City of Desire. Now it would be their cage. From the docks, they were marched through narrow streets, past bazaars, soldiers, and slaves. People stopped to stare Christian nuns among captives, a rare sight even in a conquering empire. Through the gardens, where fountains sang and peacocks screamed, they reached the shadow of Hagia Sophia, the great church now turned mosque. As the adhan echoed from the minarets, one sister whispered, "We are home, but it is no longer ours." They were taken to the palace, not to the glittering courts or ambassadorial halls, but downward through spiraling stone steps, into corridors smelling of damp and centuries of silence, a place that existed on no map. If you followed this far, you already understand this story must be told. Dark history unleashed. Not for us, but for those voices devoured by quiet. Beneath Topkapi Palace, a labyrinth of tunnels stretches unseen storerooms, servant quarters, forgotten passages veining the bedrock beneath the empire's heart. In its farthest corner, behind a false wall, archaeologists in 2011 discovered a hidden cell. Etched into the stone, dozens of small, crude crosses, scratched by nails or shards of pottery, and beneath them, in Latin, Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. It was their underground chapel. For months, perhaps years, these women lived beneath the palace silent by day, scrubbing floors, washing linens, feeding fires for rooms they'd never enter, and by night, gathering once more in that hidden chamber, hands clasped, whispering the same hymn that began it all, their final prayer to history. This story begins with memory. No priest, no altar, no Bible, only the hymns the heart remembered. These women gathered fragments of the Psalms from the cracks of memory, half-forgotten words, half-breaths, and from them, they wove prayers strong enough to keep them alive. They sang so softly that even the stones could barely hear. They brought bread and water from the palace wells in secret and performed their own communion in silence. Their worship wasn't written on paper, it was carved into stone, each scratch a testament of faith, made with the certainty that no living soul might ever see it. Among them was Sister Magdalena, the young woman who had whispered psalms aboard the ship, who had carried Sister Irene along the road, and who had not turned away when they dressed Sister Eleni in silk. As the darkness deepened, she became their voice. When archaeologists finally opened that hidden chapel, they found a tiny bird etched into a corner of the wall, Magdalena's mark. Beside it, 23 lines, one for each sister, but only 11 were complete. The rest vanished midway, swallowed by time or dust. They turned broken pottery into candle holders, a torn cloth into an altar covering, and from the shard of a shattered mirror, they carved a small, crude cross. Each night when the palace slept and the world fell silent, they returned to that narrow cell, no hymns, no sermons, only whispers. One by one, each woman knelt to share a memory, the scent of her home, the sound of a church bell, the warmth of bread before dawn. These memories became their new psalms, small offerings to a God who still listened even in the dark. In 1478, a Venetian prisoner wrote, "From beneath the harem, I heard voices, women's voices, singing in a tongue unknown, to a God who does not belong to this empire." For centuries, historians dismissed it as superstition until the chapel was discovered. Then came the heart-shattering detail: the crosses stopped. Halfway up the wall, the carvings grew frantic, uneven. The grooves deepened as if the hands worked in haste, in fear, and then silence. An Ottoman record from 1482 reads coldly, "By order of the new Sultan, the palace staff is to be cleansed. Those deemed unfit or disobedient shall be removed. No names, no graves, no trace, just one word, disposed." And thus, the 18 sisters of St. Catherine, who had walked 7 days through hell, crossed the sea in chains and carved their prayers into stone, were erased from history. Only their chapel remained a memory written in rock. In 1712, a French ambassador recorded a rumor. The old palace servants claimed that, on quiet nights, the air in the lower passages would turn cold. and faintly, very faintly, they could hear Latin hymns echoing. He dismissed it as fantasy, but walls do not lie. When the site was re-examined in 2011, archaeologists found something else: drops of wax. Not Ottoman in composition, but older, mixed with herbs. The kind of wax used in convent-made candles. It meant the vigil had continued not for days, but perhaps for years. They had kept carving, kept praying, kept refusing to disappear. Magdalena's bird was the final mark on the wall. Next to it, barely visible, 2 Greek words were scratched: "We endure." But the truth is, they did more than endure. They left a mark that empires could not erase. A chamber filled with crosses, stones heavy with prayer proof that faith can outlive the walls built to imprison it. The Ottoman Empire endured until 1922, 6 centuries of conquest and grandeur. Yet in the end, what remained were not the Sultan's decrees, not Hassan Pasha's ledgers, not the silk that bound Sister Eleni, but 4 Latin words: Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. This story isn't about religion. It's about power and defiance, about what happens when power tries to erase people, and those people refuse to vanish. The empire changed languages, redrew maps, turned cathedrals into mosques, but those 18 women, armed with nothing but fingernails and faith, redefined victory. They didn't reclaim their convent. They didn't see freedom. They weren't remembered by the world, but they left a trace. History is written by the victors, but memory belongs to the survivors. And sometimes survival looks like this: a cross carved in darkness, a prayer whispered in a forbidden tongue, a small bird etched in stone for the sisters who fell in faith. Centuries later, we found that bird again. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." These women lived forward into darkness. They walked knowing they might never return, and even now, beneath the stones, their footsteps still echo.